Wayne County asks for help from the state. Big foundation money coming to Detroit. How Michigan views the presidential hopefuls. And we take a look inside Michigan's new budget. Stay put. MiWeek starts right now.
Recently, Michigan's economy has begun to turn around. Michigan's gained over 250,000 new jobs. We've paid off $20 billion in long-term debt. And our population is increasing for the first time in a decade. But to make Michigan a top 10 state, there's still plenty of work to be done. Step up and help put Michigan on top. Learn what you can do at MichiganTurnaroundPlan.com.
Funding is also provided by Delta.
Good evening, and thanks so much for joining us for MiWeek. I'm Christy McDonald. Wayne County Executive Warren Evans has one of the toughest jobs around. He inherited a huge deficit and quickly tried to make cuts to keep the county out of bankruptcy or under emergency management. But now Evans wants help from the state. Coming up tonight, we'll talk about what this means for the budget and for county services. Also coming up, the Ford Foundation meeting in Detroit for the first time since moving away nearly 70 years ago. Why a series of foundation meetings here is a pretty big deal. Plus, presidential campaigning is in full swing, but Michigan voters don't really think much of the candidates. You'll see the numbers coming up. And Governor Snyder signs a new state budget. We'll take a look at what's in it and what's not. That is all coming up for you on MiWeek. But we do begin tonight with Wayne County Executive Warren Evans asking for help from the state. The county is trying to dig itself out of a $52 million hole. And although Evans has made moves to reduce the deficit, it appears budget cuts are not enough. Is the next step a consent agreement? That's where we begin our discussion tonight with our MiWeek contributors Nolan Finley of the Detroit News and Stephen Henderson of the Detroit Free Press. Gentlemen, it's always good to see you. And wow, Warren Evans really has it tough. He's got one of the toughest jobs, and now he's saying, you know what, we need some help here.
And it's probably the only tool left to do anything. I mean, he had something like a $55 million budget. He's cut it in half through a series of maneuvers and what have you, but he's got 23 million he needs out of the unions, and those unions are not going to come to the table and say, well, okay, you know, I'll give all this up. He's got to have a hammer. He's got to have some leverage, and the consent agreement is a pretty powerful leverage, because the threat there is, if we don't get this worked out ourselves, we'll go into emergency management and all of this stuff will be forced on you.
All right, so how are they going to work this out now, Stephen, once he writes this letter to the state, which he sent out yesterday?
Yeah, well, I think what happens is that the state reviews all the finances and decides whether there is an actual financial emergency, and then they work together to come up with a plan that will satisfy the emergency, that will make it go away. One possibility is that it may be different from the plan that Evans put together for himself. It could be harsher. It could call for more cuts or for more concessions from the unions. And I think that's the idea, is to sort of have that sort of heavy in the background as a possible, you know, threat for unions who might say, look, we don't want to give this up. I mean, this is not a pretty situation for anybody. I mean, there's not people getting, you know, rich off working for Wayne County.
Only if you worked in Botfacanos.
Well, right, there were some pensions, there were some big pensions, but those are really the minority. I mean, these are people who are making, you know, livable wages and are going to be asked to sacrifice because the management of the county screwed up for so long, and there's just no more money. I mean, there's no other way to do this stuff at this point than to cut.
Wayne County has an infrastructure it can't afford with its population and its resources. It's got to cut those fixed costs. And, you know, the county commission, I believe, voted today or before, you know, after we taped this morning, on the 13th check issue and whether to continue paying that, which was, you know, a clear giveaway to unions by previous administrations. And, you know, it's not in a contract, it's not guaranteed, and yet it costs millions of dollars a year. And, you know, they couldn't come to an agreement with the union on that. So I suspect they're going to be very difficult. It's
the
not
13th check is part of their agreement.
Not part of their
it's
bargaining
not. It's not guaranteed.
Right.
I mean, there are performance marks that they're supposed to meet
on the performance of the fund.
On the performance of the fund before they start writing them.
Those performance marks.
Part of the problem is the way they measure the performance marks. I mean, and the idea that 1 year of surplus should mean you write checks. A 13th check, that doesn't make a lot of sense in a pension fund.
Steve, is 35% underfunded. It's only funded at 65%.
Right.
They shouldn't be writing anything extra. The county, in addition to this $52 million structural deficit, needs $40 million a year just to bolster its pensions. And it'll take 10 years at that level to get anywhere close to fully funded. So I don't know where all this money is going to come from.
Okay, when I hear also consent agreement and intervention from the state, you think of it from a taxpayer standpoint. What is that going to mean for for county services, and how will that affect daily living for people?
Well, I mean, the county's going to have to start dealing with what are essential services. What are things we have to do, and what are things we just might like to do? I mean, certainly all of the economic development that Bob Ficano was really focused on when he was county executive, I imagine most of that's going to go away. You just can't afford. You can't afford to do that. The county needs to run the jail. The county needs to fund the prosecutor's office and the courts. Those are the and the sheriff, right? Those are the three. Those are the three things that you have to do, and I'm not sure that there's going to be money to do much more.
No, I don't
think
there'll be money
on this, Nolan.
for anything. And if you look at, you mentioned running the jail, that $1.2 million a month going in to support that unfinished jail, and nobody yet has a plan for how to finish this thing. This county is, I would argue, in worse shape financially than Detroit was when it went under emergency management.
All right, we'll see what happens next. Now we turn now to Detroit, where the trustees of the Ford Foundation are meeting for the first time in almost 70 years. It was founded by Edsel Ford, but the group moved to New York City back in 1946. Well, last year, the Ford Foundation shipped in $125 million to the Grand Bargain, which was instrumental in the bankruptcy deal. Foundation President Darren Walker says the group is, quote, all in on Detroit. He spoke at the Mackinac Policy Conference about the city's future.
We are in the business of hope at the Ford Foundation. And so there is no place in America to be more hopeful about than the city of Detroit. It is in so many ways positioned for a great future. All of the admonition and advice that these bright men have put forward, I completely endorse. But I also know that at the end of the day, everybody wants Detroit to succeed. Yeah. America wants Detroit to succeed. Yeah. You can feel it. And Detroit is going to succeed.
So perhaps the larger question now is, what role does philanthropy play in the city's comeback? But I do want to talk about the Ford Foundation. Let me start with you, Stephen, because I know that you were at several events this week that they were at, and it was a series of events that and meetings that they appeared in all over the city. How has the Ford Foundation's, I guess, goals and parameters changed in taking on Detroit's story and Detroit's comeback?
Well, it's part of Darren Walker, the CEO, wrote a pretty important letter a week or two ago about what the mission of that foundation should be and what the mission of philanthropy should be, and he really focused it on the growing sort of inequality that we have in America, the growing economic inequality that we see, and I think there's no question that Detroit fits nicely into that category. I mean, it's the poorest big city in America. Its government was just bankrupt and is now getting back on its feet. I think you can expect to see the Ford Foundation, which for a really long time has had very little to do with Detroit and Michigan. I think you can expect to see a real significant investment. Now, what does that look like? I don't think any of us quite knows yet, but they were asking a lot of questions about the future here and what role philanthropy ought to be playing in it. There's a tension between the idea that philanthropy should step in where government has had to step back. Is that the right role for them? Is that a sustainable role? But no matter what they decide, I think the commitment is going to be huge.
So what role should philanthropy play?
Well, I mean, clearly it should fill the gaps, and it should be taking care, particularly on the social side of things, the areas where government can no longer sustain its efforts. I mean, government got into a lot of charitable work that should be done by these private foundations. But the significance of Ford is Ford and Kresge, which were both significant in the bailout last year, they're leading foundations. So if they write a check, if they write a big check, they can bring other smaller foundations along with them. And you know, that's a lot then of critical mass behind this effort of supporting Detroit. And I think Walker recognizes the roots of this foundation and sort of its historic attachment and obligation to Detroit, and it's good to see them re-engage.
So you talk about plugging the holes that maybe the government can't quite fill. So does that mean anything about policing budgets? I mean, what are we talking about?
Historically, they have all foundations have really hesitated to do that because, as they say, we're not here to play the role that government should be playing. You know, if there's a government service that government can't offer anymore, they don't want to be stepping in and saying, well, we're going to, pay for police officers and things like that. I think what they will start to look at, I think in Detroit, the opportunity is looking at the population that we have and the needs that they have, which are really profound. Still, after the bankruptcy, of course, didn't address the lack of educational opportunities, the lack of job training, the sort of cultural isolation that people in the city are experiencing right now. I would expect philanthropy to step very heavily into those issues.
Well, I think they're looking at, they're not going to pay for basic services, but they're looking at where their money can sort of be a catalyst, where they can step in perhaps in the area of economic development. The M-Run Rail is a perfect example. If we put a little money in this, will it sort of spawn other money and private investment and what have you? Where can they invest that will have a ripple effect, an escalating effect to improve the quality of life of a community? And I think they're prepared to be very creative. It's no longer just about, well, we're going to write a check to this museum or to this organization. They really want to see their money invested in a way that delivers a big return in terms of quality of life.
The attention is good, the presence is good. What are potential pitfalls here? Any?
Well, I mean, I think again, you are substituting money into a community that hasn't had it from the outside. Well, the question I always have is, how long will this attention last, right? Will we get used to the support that we're getting from the philanthropic sector, just as they decide, well, you're not the interesting, shiny new object anymore, and we've got to go do something
And that's
else.
why it can't be to sustain services. But the greater risk here is whether the board members of these foundations will get comfortable with the level of risk that this new mission involves, because they're really acting in many ways as venture capital funds. They're investing money in different ways in ventures that may not take off, and their money may sort of be lost. Just like private venture funds, it happens there. And are these board members comfortable with that sort of high risk investment, the sort of thing it takes to make a real difference in a city like Detroit?
All right. Well, just in the past week, the field of 2016 presidential candidates has grown by 3. Hillary Clinton, Jeb Bush, Donald Trump made their intentions clear. But Michigan residents don't seem too impressed with the presidential hopefuls. A poll commissioned for the Detroit News shows that voters dislike the candidates more than they like them. Democrats Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders both had high unfavorable ratings. It's much the same for the Republicans. Jeb Bush's unfavorable rating is 17 percentage points higher than his favorable rating is. So what does this say about who will win Michigan next year? Does it say that we're all just kind of grumpy here in Michigan?
I just think,
but what's the big takeaway
I think some of it
here?
is people are annoyed that they're being asked these questions 20 months before.
No, that's just you.
Election.
Did they poll you? That was just you.
I voted like 50 times.
No, dislike.
If you look what we've seen since 2010, in almost every election, cycle, the voters have been expressing great discontent with the status quo and with their leaders, whether they're Republicans or Democrats. There has been a kick the rascals out mood going on in this country now for 5 years. I suspect if I were incumbent, I'd look at these polls, and because I don't think they're targeted at any particular individual. I think there's just a general discontent in the country about the level of political leadership. I think incumbents are going to continue to get smacked over the next couple election cycles until we start to solve some of the problems.
So will the general discontent lead to lethargy at the polls, that you won't get a large turnout?
Sometimes it does, and sometimes, I mean, look, sometimes it turns people out, you know.
I mean, the last two presidential elections set records in terms of turnout, and the Democrats have figured out some things in terms of getting new voters to the polls in a way that has transformed the electorate, at least in presidential years. I mean, again, I do think that there is a weariness that's associated with those numbers in particular, that why are you asking me in June of 2015 what I'm going to do in November of 2016? We haven't even seen anything from these candidates yet.
But the truth is, you look at this field, both on the Republican side and the Democratic side, and there's nobody who inspires the people. There's no great sort of transformational figure in the way that Obama was in 2008, where he got people excited about his candidate, his candidacy, and his potential.
Yeah, but hasn't the time run out, though, for that mystery candidate to come out of nowhere and to take people by storm? Because don't you have to, by the next couple of months, declare so you can start getting the money?
I don't think there's going to be another mystery candidate emerge here. I think you're looking at the candidates. The question is whether somebody can catch lightning in a bottle and start to inspire people and come up with a message that sets him or her apart from everyone else. You look on the Democratic side, I mean, Hillary Clinton's besieged by all of these questions about her ethics. On the Republican side, they're just going to beat each other into the ground, 20 people slamming each other. It's hard to see how anybody rises.
So then if you're talking about message and getting people excited to vote, so then what are you think, Stephen, are some of the major issues that are going to be central in this
for starters, I think
election?
this is a different election than 2008. It's a lot more like the election of 2000, where you don't have a major crisis that's looming. You don't have, we're not losing 700,000 jobs a month, and the auto industry is about to go out of business. It's much more. It's not as much of a change election as 2000 was, and so the candidates have to define sort of how they will. It's more of a tinkering kind of agenda than we got to throw everything out and start over again, and that's a harder sell with voters who, despite things going much better, are still really restless about and worried about how things are going to go. Sometime before the next election, we're likely to see another reset in the economy. I mean, it's just the way it works. That could inspire a little more urgency from the candidates. But I think what you're going to hear from these people is about, I'm more competent than this person to govern, which is a really different message than I'm the person to save us from this crisis.
It's a lot like the situation Rick Snyder walked into in 2010. I think that, sitting here now, and again, it's a long way out, but if you look at the situation the world is in, this could not be an economic election by the time we hit 2016.
Might be a foreign policy.
It could be a national security election if someplace in the world just flat out blows up. And the potential of that is higher than it's been probably in a quarter century or more.
All right, well, unfortunately for you, we're going to keep talking. We're going to keep talking about it. We are.
All this year and all next year.
That's right. All right, it's on our agenda.
Hey, get a sports right.
That's his dream. Don't even tempt him. All right, turning now to Lansing. Governor Snyder has signed a $54.5 billion state budget for the 2016 fiscal year. The budget includes $400 million from the general fund for road repairs. Huzzah. There's a modest increase in per pupil funding for schools, and the film incentives are being cut entirely. Critics say the budget falls short on priorities, especially in terms of finding a long-term fix for the state's crumbling roads and bridges. You will hear the governor, though, tout the fact that they are done with this budget way before the deadline.
Yeah, I don't think this budget's done.
You don't think the budget is done?
No, I mean, I think sometime between now and October,
they're going to have to go back and
get a road agreement in place, and that will necessitate throwing this budget out because it'll include a lot of cuts that aren't in this budget and hopefully some new revenue. So if this budget's set, we're all in trouble when it comes to roads.
Why are we all in trouble?
Well, we're in trouble with roads. We're also in trouble in terms of the investment agenda that the governor laid out in his State of the State talk. You go back to the earlier this year, and he was up there talking about the river of opportunity and investing in things that would give people chances to move up the economic ladder. This budget doesn't reflect a lot of that, and that's not his fault.
I mean, he's got his preschool reading.
The preschool thing is in
program.
there, yeah. But look at what's not being done in K-12. Look at what we still are not doing in higher ed. We still are not catching up for all the losses that we sustained in the 2000 to 2010 window, and so it's a little disappointing in that way. I'm not sure how much of the blame I lay at his feet. It's he's got a legislature that's absolutely unwilling to go along.
We're not printing money in this state. I mean, it's a $54 million budget, but only somewhat less than 10 or around 10 million is actual general fund money that they can do the things you're talking about with. I mean, it does reflect.
Maybe we need some new revenue.
It does reflect this sort of changing relationship over the last couple of decades between Washington and the states, where so much of the spending is in the budget is mandated out of Washington. There's very little discretionary money to work with, and it's fine to say we need new revenue, we need to raise taxes, but this is a state where household incomes have barely moved in 10, 12 years. That's a big ask.
So what kind of work is actually going to be happening this summer on a roads deal?
Well, the Senate's going to stay in session. The House went home. The House feels like their little fantasy fix that
they put something on the table and they said, this is what we want, so you guys go figure it out from there.
Now they're going to the beach. They didn't produce a solution here. They produced another gimmick, another Band-Aid.
Where's the precedent for opening up the budget and going back in after you've signed it?
Well, I mean, technically, you don't have to be done with the budget till what? September, the end of September? It's October 1 as the 5th. So, I mean, the governor has been really proud of getting things done early because we used to be so late. It used to go past October, October 1. But there's nothing wrong. I'm not sure how long you have to go back before you would see them doing this. Usually it would be because something happened and you had to
well, you have to go in and budget and make adjustments. We did it every spring for years here. So I mean, you can always open the document. I mean, as Steve said, it doesn't go into effect till October 1st. And if they get a roads deal, they're going to have to open it up.
And let's hope they get a roads deal, right? And finally tonight, the Detroit City Council voted down that controversial proposal to extend a curfew for minors at this weekend's River Days Festival. However, they did agree on a curfew for the fireworks celebration on Monday, and anyone under 18 must be accompanied by an adult from 8 p.m. until 6 a.m. in the surrounding downtown area only. So was this a good compromise, do you think, Noah? Let me start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a good compromise. They were up against a really untenable situation. You got 40,000 Baptists coming in for a convention at Cobo Center this weekend, and 10,000 of those are going to be minors. You can't lock them in the hotel rooms. You can't lock them into Cobo. And Steve and I sat through a couple of meetings over the last week or so where we're trying to get people to stop thinking about the curfew and the hours and all of that, and start thinking about how we make downtown safer, make the curfew sort of meaningless by getting more volunteers, not only to bring kids down and supervise them, but also to keep eyes on the crowd, an eye on the downtown area. And so, out of those meetings, we got these angels, I forgot what they call them, Detroit Angels, that are going to be working the crowd. There's a couple, 300 of them going to be deployed. The business community.
Who are they? Where are they from?
I think some of them are people who volunteer for Angels Night every year, and then they put out a call, I just think, through the churches.
Well, Chaplain Corps, the CB patrols, they've got an infrastructure of volunteers, the reserves. And, several businesses stepped up. Strategic staffing is going to give them vests. DTE is going to provide transportation to downtown Detroit partnerships kicking in, the Illage organization and this is the first time we've had sort of an Angels Night approach to the fireworks. And if that works, the curfews move.
Well, I mean, and what we've proven on Angels Night over time is that presence matters, right? If you have people out who just look like they're responsible for what's going on, a lot of people who would cause trouble think differently about it. We've gone, you know, from hundreds of fires on the nights before Halloween to dozens, which is not perfect, but it's a much better thing. And I think you can take that same approach long term to the fireworks. That people ought to be able to come downtown and enjoy it, whether they're kids or adults. But we can't just have you know, lots of unsupervised minors wandering around. It's not that they cause trouble, it's that they are a distraction for the police from dealing with the people who are the problem.
30 seconds left. Do you think we'll ever have a time where there is no curfew at this event?
I mean, what Chief Craig said in our meetings is, if this volunteer effort works, we'll just put a normal curfew in place, the normal 11 o'clock curfew next year. And there's no reason this volunteer effort shouldn't work.
Right.
If people will not only come out and help watch the crowds and provide some sense of security, but also let's get kids down here, you know, who may not have any other means. If the churches and other community groups, bring them down.
Bring them and let them be
Let
part of it.
them enjoy it.
Yeah,
Let them enjoy it. It's going to be a great weekend, and of course, fireworks on Monday. All right, thanks, guys. And that is going to do it for MiWeek. We're so glad that you joined us. We'd like to hear what you think about the show, so find us on Facebook and Twitter. Plus, head to MiWeek.org right now for a conversation you won't see on TV. I'm Christy McDonald. Have a great night, and we'll see you next time.
Oh, you got it.
Recently, Michigan's economy has begun to turn around. Michigan's gained over 250,000 new jobs. We've paid off $20 billion in long-term debt. And our population is increasing for the first time in a decade. But to make Michigan a top 10 state, there's still plenty of work to be done. Step up and help put Michigan on top. Learn what you can do at MichiganTurnaroundPlan.com.
Funding is also provided by Delta,